Cask Ale is the lifeblood of the British beer industry and a vital part of our country's culture. It was only a few decades ago that it was all we drank in our pubs, but in the last decade or so it's been in serious, sometimes double-digit decline. The closure of our beautiful pubs and increasingly tight margins in beer all play their part, but there's also been a drop-off in interest in cask ale, especially among younger generations. Its reputation has been damaged by clichés about who drinks it and quality issues related to how hard it is to brew well and serve right. We've come to believe that cask ale at its best is the ultimate way to enjoy beer. We've fallen in love with our traditional pubs, styles, breweries and culture and hate to see it slowly falling apart. So we've decided to do something about it. 3 years ago we made a 5-part documentary exploring the British cask ale scene, through its rich history and traditions to the modern challenges and opportunities it faces. Inspired but also concerned about its future, in the last episode we came up with an ambitious plan: to lead a campaign to get cask recognised by UNESCO as intangible heritage. Since then we've been working hard behind the scenes to gather support and lobby politicians and interest groups. But we've also been collecting the evidence we'll need to present to UNESCO when the time comes. Evidence in the form that we know best: film. So in association with some fantastic beer businesses, we're thrilled to present Series 2 of Keep Cask Alive. Hey Beer Geeks, so I really hope you've been enjoying the second season of Keep Cask Alive. You'll notice I am back where it all started, at the Tetley here in Leeds, to start an episode all about our actual UNESCO campaign, how long it's going to take and exactly what Brad and I have got ourselves into. And I'm here again because we are actually screening the first episode, which involved the Tetley, here tonight. So we're going to get, because this is the first day that the video comes out digitally and physically, we're going to get a sense of what kind of impact we might be having. Well folks, it's all been leading up to this. 11 feature-length documentaries about cask ale, gathering evidence and support for an application to UNESCO to get our national drink recognised as intangible heritage. This week we're going to explain what we've been up to and what we've achieved so far towards this rather lofty ambition. But first we should explain exactly what intangible heritage really is. Because when you think about UNESCO, you're probably thinking about this, or this, or this. These are UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Physical places recognised for their natural beauty or cultural significance and protected to help ensure they don't disappear. But as beautiful as the Sparkle Point is, the fact it disappears so quickly is kind of the point. At the end of Keep Cask Alive Season 1, we wanted to find a concrete way to help protect cask from further decline. UNESCO World Heritage obviously didn't apply, and we couldn't look to a PGI or similar either, because cask is not a specific product or style. UNESCO's Intangible Heritage Treaty looks to protect cultural phenomena, essentially processes, knowledge and skills that are passed down through generations. Think opera singing in Italy, bell ringing in Spain, the rumba in Cuba, the making of borscht in Ukraine, and of course Belgian beer culture, which was recognised in 2018. So we had a plan, but having boldly announced it on YouTube, we realised we had absolutely no idea where to start. So it was a relief when I got an email from a CBC fan called Jed Mears just a few weeks later. Jed, it turned out, is a law lecturer at York University with a particular interest in legal ways of protecting pubs and pub heritage. He heard our podcast in which we discussed our very vague plan and quite rightly assumed that we needed some help. During his first call though, he explained that the UK had not ratified the correct element of the UNESCO treaty, and so a year went by with little progress. But then completely out of the blue, Jed emailed to say that the then Conservative government had decided to ratify and were consulting on how to go about it. It was this news that inspired us to drop all our other projects and start recording Series 2 of Keep Cask Alive, starting with a trip to York to talk next steps with Jed himself.
So Jed, we've been emailing for quite some time now, but this is the first time we've met and had a pint of cask together.
Yeah.
What if we can get intangible heritage recognition, what sort of practically, would that mean? What kind of protections can UNESCO? Or
Absolutely, we can maybe come to the process next because it's a bit full on and a bit of an administrative process.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say is protection for something like intangible cultural heritage and through UNESCO is not like the kind of protections you get for geographical indications. So it's not like Stilton cheese or champagne or Melton Mowbray pork pies. It's not like that. You get access to a series of funds through UNESCO. It's not huge amounts of money, but it gives you a bit of access to intangible cultural heritage funds and other forms of support for things like improving awareness and education of whatever the thing is you're protecting. The second thing it does, really pragmatically, is it gives a bit of an impetus for researchers and other people involved in the sector. So in this case, brewers themselves, places like Heriot Watt that are really heavily involved in the education of sort of cask beer production, to do more to document those processes, to make sure they can be passed on for future generations and so on. And the third benefit of it, in many respects, even though it's a little bit, I don't want to say grubby, that's probably not the right word, but really practical, it's kind of a tourism profile raising kind of benefit.
A marketing.
Yeah, exactly, a marketing benefit.
Important enough that it's being recognised.
And when you look at UNESCO, it's kind of a bit like this for other forms of intangible cultural heritage, that kind of inscription, that kind of process is partly about drawing attention to something as being of wider cultural significance, as something worthy of protection and worthy of safeguarding. So it doesn't sort of carry, it stems to a legal convention and there are a series of safeguarding duties that are imposed, but it's quite a bit softer than when we think about product designations. The two applications that are really interesting parallel applications to this are firstly the Belgian beer culture application. But I think the other one that really stands out is a more recent one, which was in 2022, I think it was, which is the French baguette. The parallels with cask beer in there are really interesting. They sort of flag it's a fresh product, and that means it's something that people need to sort of approach the baking of in a particular kind of way. They talk about the kind of spaces in which it's consumed. They talk about baguette festivals and the idea that we celebrate this product. And so you can sort of read this application and think,
I think I've just found a new passion in
a
life.
new holiday.
Festival.
Yeah, but it's a really interesting application where it chimes so nicely when thinking about when you're protecting products and protecting things like cask beer. It's not just about the product, and that's what this idea of intangible cultural heritage is trying to get at. There's a whole series of practices around that product, both in terms of its manufacture and in terms of its enjoyment, that you can also think about safeguarding as well, and that's what they're trying to get at through the UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage.
Yeah, and I get because it's slightly harder to explain because it's got its sort of fingers in many pies. Many of these intangible heritage applications, I guess, does it make the process more complicated to get that recognition?
Yeah. So the process is a very long process. The first step, if you like, is your sort of national level step, and any of the nation states who are the signatories through to the committee who've ratified the convention have a national inventory. And the very first step is thinking about how you list forms of intangible cultural heritage that you want to be safeguarding on that inventory. And there's a national process to do that. The UK government launched a consultation. It was a little bit out of the blue. I think many people were expecting it. It was good news, but a little bit out of the blue. And the next step is looking to get it listed in one of the UNESCO lists. And broadly speaking, there's a couple of different types that exist within that sort of intragovernmental level, that sort of it's a worldwide list, if you like, of examples of intangible cultural heritage. Now, we're a bit of the way off that, but what that would look like generally is, if we were thinking about putting cask beer in this sort of process and getting something into one of those final lists, you should have your initial application to get it on the inventory. And that's a bit of a slightly bureaucratic process, but it's not really that much of a legal process. It's almost a bit of a lobbying kind of process. You're thinking about drawing evidence that the community supports the application. You're trying to flesh out about what it is you're actually trying to safeguard and protect in terms of that intangible cultural heritage. And after you've done that, and it's on the national register, you then need to convince the nation state that that's one of the key examples, one of the key flagship intangible cultural heritage examples that they want to get inscribed on that intergovernmental list, on that UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage list. And nation states don't put forward many. We get one a year or so. I mean, you don't get many going forward to the national list, so it's a bit of lobbying and effort to try and make sure that you're putting those forward. And what happens then is you do an application. It's quite a long application form that you need to get some evidence for and all the rest of it. And then it goes to an intergovernmental committee that then decide whether to grant those applications or not.
It feels to me, sat here in my own little beer bubble, that there isn't much in this country that could be more important to protect than A, this incredible heritage of cask brewing and cask serving, but B, the incredible pubs in which it's it's served. What kind of things, what kind of evidence do we need to put together to sort of prove what's in every cask beer lover's head, but seems quite hard to put across?
Oh, it's a great question, and I think the best way of answering that is looking at other applications. And broadly speaking, there's a few different kinds of evidence that seem to inform those applications. The first is that there's some sort of educational practice and training around the development of that intangible cultural heritage craft. So whether that's training people to, in terms of thinking about breweries and the work that they do, all the way through to organisations like Heriot Watt, to more informal things about trying to inform the public. The second thing that you need to be able to illustrate, and this comes through really strongly in the Belgian beer culture application, is you need the buy-in of the community. And by the community, we don't just mean the general public, we mean all of those organisations that are involved in campaigning, all the organisations that are involved in trying to safeguard the practice. I mean, it's not hard to see how this translates into the context of cask beer, and things like, talk about the baguette festivals, looking at ways of celebrating that culture and tradition as well. So they're really useful. And the final thing is you need some indication of safeguarding and what safeguarding looks like, something about preservation of that practice. Now, one way of doing that, and you see this again within the Belgian beer application, also within other applications for similar artisan products at the same time as well, is research, looking at examining sort of cask beer consumption or consumption of alcohol and other drinks within pubs as being a cultural phenomenon that's worthy of study and worthy of sort of tracking in terms of change over time.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to go, a lot more emails for you and I to exchange. But I can't thank you enough for the help you've already given, because
great.
that was, a pipe dream at the end of a series. Possibly a couple of beers in, we were like, we should add this to the video, and then there was the podcast discussion. So, you've made the idea of intangible heritage tangible to us.
Now, I cannot and will not claim that we have got everything right.
As it turned out, the UNESCO consultation was one of the last acts of the Conservative government, because an election was called not long after. To seize the moment when all parties were looking for our votes, we jump-started our lobbying campaign, getting in touch with all the industry interest groups we knew, the Society of Independent Brewers, CAMRA, the BPA and more. And amazingly, they all backed us. So it is the 4th of July, election day here in the UK. And I'm delighted to say that a couple of weeks ago we got some very exciting emails. One was from the BBPA saying they were going to back our UNESCO pledge and ask the government to do so in the first 100 days of government, whichever government it is, we think we know. And the same with CAMRA as well, they've put it to their manifesto. So we've now got the backing of the two biggest sort of consumer and industry lobbies in the beer industry in the UK. So that's very, very exciting, and we'll see whichever government gets in upholds those pledges. While the government consulted and quangoed, ummed and ahed.
So will the Minister reverse this tax grab and start supporting the great British local?
We absolutely recognise the importance of our community pubs.
We decided to take Jed's research advice. But having read the UNESCO application for the baguette and indeed one for Spanish cider, we decided to go one step further in our Belgian application research and jump on the Eurostar. Brussels, baby! Vloggers on tour! From there we headed straight through the Grand Place to Belgium's old stock exchange, now converted into an epic new museum that's entirely dedicated to Belgium's beer scene. Well, welcome to Brussels, and just about the greatest roof bar I've ever been to, over 100 beers and a view of the Grand Place. And we're actually at the top of the Belgian beer experience, Belgian beer world here in Brussels, where we've been learning about the history of Belgian beer and of course the way that it's influenced culture. And we've come to Belgium not just to learn that, not just to explore this incredible UNESCO recognised beer culture, but also to chat to some of the people who got this done. So people who have gone down the path that Brad and I are starting to walk down and have got UNESCO recognition for Belgian beer culture. And there's absolutely no doubt that it deserved it. Belgian Beer World is a remarkable place. A beautiful historic building filled with state-of-the-art exhibits that do a pretty good job of explaining to your average drinker both how beer is made and why Belgium's beer scene is so unique. It's also, well, uniquely Belgian. That's going to be a nice little beer. Top of brewer. What? Maybe something lost in translation there. But look at this dude. That is what it's like being in my head sometimes. Brad and I found ourselves wishing that the UK had something similar, and indeed took its brewing heritage half as seriously.
This is what beer tourism can look like. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have something like this? Belgium, in Brussels, they built a virtual brew house in this amazing building dedicated to the production of beer. It's incredible. We can make a mash. We can mill. We can even have a look inside as the beer is brewing. It's absolutely incredible. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had something like this in the UK that championed our own unique beer culture?
Inspired and thirsty, we headed off on a beer crawl to explore the joys of Brussels' UNESCO-protected beer scene. If I had to sum it up, it would be the reverence beer receives, whether in a taproom, pub, bar or restaurant, through the careful pours, correct glassware, incredible diversity of styles, and real sense of history. To me, Belgium as a nation seems to be one of the few that understands and celebrates both beer's central role in society and the idea that it can be an elevated experience like fine wine and scotch. Whether it's Stella Artois or a lambic aged on orange wine must, it's a part of their identity and should be treated as such. The fact that it's the first nation to get its beer scene recognised by UNESCO makes perfect sense, but that doesn't mean it was easy, as we found out when, a little worse for wear the next day, we met Norbert Hukemies, perhaps the key figure in getting it done, at my favourite Brussels beer bar.
You may know that in Belgium, the cultural affairs are, the responsibility for cultural affairs is with the three communities: the Flemish community, the French-speaking community, the German-speaking community. And I was working at the Ministry of the German-speaking community, and in this ministry I was responsible for the project of the beer culture as cultural, intangible cultural heritage. Mm-hmm. The initiative came from the Belgian brewers, so from the Federation of Belgian Brewers. They initially had the idea to have the beer culture listed as intangible cultural heritage. Then they introduced their application to the three communities, and then the three communities recognized it at their level. So this was the first step, to have a recognition at the national level. And then the three communities together decided to put this forward to the UNESCO. And this whole process, it took us, I would say, 2 years, because what you have to make sure is that everyone that is implicated in this element, in this culture, has to be also consulted. He has to have the possibility to give his own opinion, to put his thoughts into the application. If you have a small cultural practice somewhere in a village, this is easy.
Yeah.
But who is implicated in beer culture? You have the brewers, of course, but that is only one part. It's only the production part. Then you have consumer associations, you have the beer clubs, the pubs, you have the restaurants. You have universities that train brewing engineers, beer sommeliers, and all these people had to gather, and we had to inform them what we wanted to put in this application, and they could comment and they could put in their thoughts.
What's been the benefit? I guess it's been nearly a decade since that happened.
Yes,
now. What's the benefit?
This is a question I have often to answer, and I must confess it's impossible to give an answer to that. Of course, the first thing was that we had a national, but also, it's incredible, at an international level, we had press coverage, immense. It was so big. We were really surprised. I was surprised, I must say. I didn't expect that. But all over the planet, you had reactions. You had articles in the newspapers, and
I think I probably wrote some of those back in 2016.
Possible, yes. And I think that is certainly one of the effects. That is something that we considered for granted. Our beer culture. Yes, it's so normal. Mm-hmm. And then we suddenly discovered this is something special. It's a special culture here in Belgium, and it is something that is part of our identity. I think we knew it before, but it's more people realize that. And this is mainly, I think it's the main effect.
It's very heartening to hear you say that the UNESCO recognition had a huge impact on how Belgians saw their beer culture, because one of the main reasons that Brad and I have done this campaign is because we see British cask ale as, you know, completely passed over, I think, by the British public. We've forgotten how special cask ale can be,
Yes.
and how fundamental it is to our identity and our culture.
Yes.
So I'm hoping it has exactly that effect, that British people will look on their cask ale with pride in a way they
I
haven't.
think there's a high probability, because in German we say nobody is prophet in his own country. So if someone from abroad tells you that something that you have and that you do is special, I think it's more important than if you self.
What would be your one tip to us? What did you learn about the process through doing it that we should try and take on board?
I think one important element is to define who is implicated in this cask culture. I imagine that it's not so easy neither, because a lot of people are around this.
Clear definitions and clear
Yes.
evidence and statements from the people
Yes,
involved.
I think this is one. And the other is, I think it's important to be very precise about how to fill in this application from UNESCO. This is normal. They have applications from all over the world, from hundreds of different countries, different cultures. So they must have a good procedure, and I think this is important. But you know that, and you,
Don't
I'm
give
sure
them an
you'll do
excuse
it.
to say no. Hopefully. So that's the end of our exploration of Belgian beer culture, and now we're headed back to the UK via the Eurostar to take everything we learned from Norbert and all the lovely people that we met here over the last couple of days to show what we could do to get the British cask ale industry recognised by UNESCO, and to start with, to get that national recognition that's so important. So we're back in the UK now, and I've been basically locked in this studio editing together all the Keep Cask Alive episodes and trying to keep the Keep Cask Alive campaign element rolling, which has proven tricky. We don't have much control over these things while the government tries to kick itself into gear. And we were supposed to have a petition live on the House of Commons website weeks and weeks and weeks ago, ready for the start of this series, which is now 5 weeks in. And unfortunately, due to delays, due to the sheer number of petitions they're having to vet before they can put live, it's actually a 6 to 8 week wait for those petitions to go live instead of the 2 weeks we were originally told. So I don't know whether that petition will be live, but if you want to help out, you can join our mailing list and we'll let you know when that goes live. But we have had some successes. So I'm very excited to say that the government did actually get in touch, the civil servant that is running the UNESCO national inventory, so the list of UK government recognised examples of intangible heritage. They've been in touch to kind of manage our expectations about the UNESCO element, but also to explain the process and what they'll be looking for when they open that up. And they've said that's probably going to be in spring, so hopefully only in a couple of weeks, which means I'm going to start putting together our proposals for that and start sending out to all of the stakeholders. So there is stuff that I can do, but I'm really keen that we get this petition live and start that kind of word of mouth campaign. And to do that, I thought there is one lobbying group that I really need to speak to, one that is world famous for the incredible work that they've done to kind of word of mouth consumer campaigning, and that is CAMRA. So they are sponsors of this series now, and they are indeed one of the most powerful consumer organisations pretty much in the world. And we were lucky enough to head up to Birmingham to speak to the chair, Ash. There's the very obvious side of what CAMRA does, which you talked about, which is obviously, of course, it's the campaigns, it's the press releases, it's the statements, it's the vouchers, it's the support of the sort of the very visible industry. But a lot of the work that CAMRA does is behind the scenes that people might not be aware of how it works or what really the aim is or what you're doing. So like the lobbying side and the sort of the consumer interest side of that, how does that sort of work within CAMRA?
who's doing that? Is that the volunteers or employees?
It's a bit of both, and you're right that it's maybe the unsung part of CAMRA, but it's really hard, I think, to get people as excited about that because it's very slow burn, and you might not get a reward on that for years. You know, we've had campaigns that have lasted decades, and then we eventually get the thing we ask for, and you kind of almost you've been asking so long, you kind of forgot you're asking for it, and so you celebrate a little bit, but it's not short and exciting like a lot of maybe more boots on the ground campaigning is. And so traditional CAMRA campaigning, and people tell me about in the 70s and 80s, they did these things of taking caskets out in front of breweries or having funerals of pubs that were closing, which I think is still great. When pubs are threatened in the local area, I think it's really important people do that boots on the ground campaigning. But so much of what we do, is behind the scenes and quiet, but it is so valuable. And so what we have, I think it's about 48, 50 members of staff. At the moment, the office is in St Albans. We're moving it to Luton later this year. And they are so involved in getting that set up for us. So we have huge things going on behind the scenes where some of our staff are just talking to members of the government every day, picking up the phone, and we have that power and that clout. The great thing of having 150,000 members and 50 odd years of campaigning success is when the government wants to talk to people about beer, they often call us. It's not us having to bang down the door and say, can you listen to us? They're picking up the phone and saying, what does CAMRA think about this? What does CAMRA members think about this? And just to give you an example, start of this year, late last year, there was the budget announcement where they said they wanted to investigate getting more access to market for independent and smaller brewers. And, straight away, CAMRA wants to be involved in that. That's really important to what we believe in. And I had a meeting with government, a couple of members of the staff. We sat down with members of the Department of Business and Trade, 2-hour meeting where we're discussing, what are the actual factors involved? How do pubs struggle? What do consumers think when they're given choice, or what I call the illusion of choice, where a bar might have 4 or 5 casks on, but actually they're all the same brewery, they're just different brands, and then that brewery is owned by some multinational that you've never heard of or things like that. And so we were trying to explain to them, and that's really important. But it's hard to sell that as an exciting reason to join CAMRA because it's quiet and it's going on behind the scenes.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because definitely there's this whole political cliche almost around, if you're on the election trail, you have to be seen pouring a pint, holding a pint, being a
pouring it badly.
Of the people. It's like these people have never seen pints before, mostly. But there's very much as we would love to speak to government is incredibly keen to be seen promoting beer. And sometimes the actions don't necessarily reflect that at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is difficult, and you have to assess. There are some MPs and other members of government and other elected officials all around the country, in the devolved parliaments as well, who are really, really passionate. And you talk to them, and you can see that they're switched on. They'll tell you all the breweries in their area. They'll tell you the pubs they do drink in. For every one MP like that, you're going to have a couple of MPs or officials who, they'll pour the bad pint. They'll whisper in their ear for a few moments. They might click on, they might not, but it's gauging that and finding what works for them. They might not like pubs and beer themselves personally, but then you talk about the economic benefits, the jobs that pubs create, the money they put into the local economy, how they support the charity sector and the community there. There's always an angle we can find, even if pubs and beer aren't their thing.
The biggest question for Brad and me since we came up with this idea is, how we go about that kind of lobbying and campaigning process. Because obviously, CAMRA has, like we've said, 50 years of heritage doing this, 150,000 people behind them. I've now been to Parliament, I've chatted to MPs, but at the moment it's 2 of us and the people that are sponsoring this. How would you go about sort of building a campaign from the ground up for this kind of recognition?
It's about identifying that cohort of people that you can call on and to support you, and recognising everyone supports in a slightly different way. And going back to the CAMRA point, some people say to me, you've got 150,000 members, but actually 10,000 are going out there and stomping their feet and doing kind of the hard yards. And I think, well, actually that 140,000 are still brilliant because they're giving us financial support. They send letters to their MPs and other elected officials, and just chatting to their friends in the pub about campaigning is really helpful. So it's how do you get as many people as possible spreading your message? And it's kind of distilling it down into very, very simple ideas, talking about what you want to see as an outcome, and then riling up passion in people to, even if it is just mentioning it to their friend in the pub and saying, have you seen this on Facebook or in the paper about this campaign, or have you joined this group that I'm getting involved in and doing it? It slowly builds, and when we talked about earlier about kind of our parliamentary campaigns, it's a snowball effect. Sometimes we've spent a couple of years having to do the hard yards of just chatting to people, building it up. And then once you get a couple of known faces or really passionate people or a couple of MPs or members of devolved parliaments getting interested, it suddenly starts snowballing. They'll talk to their people and they talk to their people, and suddenly you go, oh, this is getting its own kind of head of steam on it, and off it goes. And people say to me, well, how is Camera going to get new members? How do we get more young people involved? Do we need to be on Facebook and Twitter, and do we need to be doing this and that? And I always say the easiest thing you can do to recruit a Camera member is if you see a friend or someone you just know, it might be someone you've recognised in the pub, you've seen them a few times, maybe chatted over a beer once or twice, talk to them about Camera. They might join. That, one person recruiting one person is much more powerful than sometimes, these big campaigns that you spend a lot of money on, but actually you can't see it, you can't feel that passion, it's not tangible to do that. And so, yeah, you're right, word of mouth is still the biggest thing. And if you can do it over a pint, because then you can point it and go, you like this, right? And you go, yeah, and you go, so you want to protect this, right? And you go, well, yes, obviously. You go, so you want to support my campaign, right?
I see your point.
And you've got them.
Even 50 years on, Camera's work is powerful and vital. Almost more so because most of it goes unnoticed and takes years to come to fruition. I genuinely urge you to join and support their campaigning by becoming a member at the link in the video description, because it was inspiring stuff from Ash, reminding us of the power that conversation face to face can have, whether it's with friends over a pint or in Parliament with an MP. Which was timely because literally the day before this video was due to go live, we got an invite we just couldn't turn down, even if it meant a re-edit and a last minute rush to Westminster. So here we are, literally the day before the final episode of Keep Cask Alive goes live, and no editing involved. This has all come together on the last day. Not only did I get an email this morning saying that our petition is approved and is going live, but we are today meeting Tonia Antinati, who is the chair of the All-Parliamentary Group for Beer, to talk about the future of Cask, to talk about the struggles of pubs and how we can get UNESCO over the line. Brad and I are still kind of pinching ourselves. It's April Fool's Day. I don't believe this is a joke, but we have literally the day before the end of this campaign got the campaign started.
So Tony, thanks so much for having us here. We really appreciate you taking the time. The first question would be, you are the chair of the All-Parliamentary Group for Beer. What does that parliamentary group do and what does it entail?
Well, it's one of the most popular and one of the most important groups in Parliament, and many people joke about it because they say typical of you to be in charge of beer, but every member of Parliament has pubs that sell beer and a community around that, and that's what MPs are here to do. We're here to serve our communities, and they are a big part of it. You'll find them in every corner of your constituency. Mine's semi-rural. They play a huge part in Gower, on the peninsula and in the towns, and it's a place where people go, people love, whether they have a beer, whether they have a low or no, it's their choice, but it's the fact that they're part of the community. It's really important to them.
It feels like, for years, the people have talked about the pub being in crisis for years and years. What do you think needs to happen to try and help them, make the margins and continue to be that community that we know they could be?
I think it's really important because I get to see a lot of community pubs doing a lot of fundraising, doing a lot of care, particularly since COVID, looking after elderly and more vulnerable people in the community. And it's celebrating their role and getting people to go into the pub to see that it's more than just having a pint. The pint is very important, but I also think that the wider community is the driver, and the driver for growth and jobs, and everybody's had a pub job, everybody's worked behind a bar or in hospitality, and people come to the UK, people come to my constituency especially, and they want to know where they can have a good local pint and they can have something good to eat.
So we've come here to talk to you about the idea of getting UNESCO protection or designation for pubs and for the cask ale that's sort of served there. I understand that you used to work on the petitions committee.
Yes.
And we've just had our petition go live. How can we make that petition, which I think is sort of key to certainly sort of the public awareness of it? How
Well,
can we get that?
for the government to respond to your petition, you need to have 10,000 votes, but to get an actual debate in Westminster Hall, in Parliament, you need to get 100,000 votes. You can do that by sending it out to all your networks, telling people on, social media to sign and get them to share, and get the parliamentarians, all 650 of us, we can be written to by our constituents, told about how important it is and what it means to them. And that way, you can even get a petition and we can present it in Parliament. Let's, just get the momentum behind this, and let's get you the support you need from government to make it really happen, because it really does matter.
After years of little progress, it really feels like this pipe dream might just be possible. Not only can you now sign our official government petition at the links below, but we have the ringing endorsement and practical help of an MP and the all-parliamentary group she chairs. That gives us access to halls we never thought we'd walk, and I think calls for a beer.
Johnny, this series has been an absolutely incredibly wild ride. The places we've been everywhere. The people we've met, they've been amazing. And the culture we've observed throughout our journeys, it's all incredible. It's all vitally important to our kind of culture.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done probably more travel in the last year than maybe we have in the history of the channel, but all of it within the UK, discovering exciting new stuff, and particularly the North has been a real revelation. It's not just where sort of modern cask with the bitter started, it's also the place that's held on to that heritage so much. And we've ended up pretty much, I would say philosophically, where we started, which is in a pub with an incredible heritage, 400-500 years old, and the kind of place, we're in Hatton Garden, it's just surrounded by new builds.
Yeah.
And this is the only link, along with the churches, I guess,
that's about it,
to the history that we have. And these are the kinds of places that we lose when we start to lose cask ale culture, which is, the lifeblood, as we've said, of British pubs. We've learned huge amounts about UK, particularly English culture and beer culture throughout all of this. And if what we've been talking about in this series really rings true with you, if you've understood in the same way that we have the importance of keeping, cask ale alive, of keeping the breweries alive, and of keeping the pubs absolutely buzzing like the old mitre where we are here, then you need to join our mailing list to learn more about the campaign and how you can help. You need to join, or rather sign, our petition on the UK government website. And of course, if you can, join our Patreon or donate to the campaign, because there's loads more to come from Keep Cask Alive. Hopefully a third season, but absolutely like 9 or 10 more episodes of the stuff we couldn't cram in to this series will be going live throughout 2025. So we still need support, we still need signatures, we still need letters to MPs, and we still need funding to get this over the line with UNESCO in a couple of years.
Making Keep Cask Alive has been one of the most challenging but rewarding experiences of my life. People often ask me if I'll ever get bored of beer, or I'll ever run out of stories to tell. Sometimes Brad and I wonder if we will, but filming this series has reassured us that beer and the people who help make and serve it are an endless source of inspiration. There's so much history, culture, community and industry in a pint that we'll only really run out of stories if that culture starts to disappear. Our hope is that this campaign will stop that from happening. But even if we fail in our potentially decade-long journey towards UNESCO recognition, I hope the stories told in these videos inspire others to support their cask ale breweries and pubs. As Ash from Camera said, word of mouth is still the most powerful tool people have when they care about something. And as we showed in last week's episode, the pub happens to be the best place to start a revolution. So please back us via Patreon or whatever to get this campaign over the line. But even more importantly, back us by going to your local and buying a fresh pint of cask.